My miter saw station. Only 3 years in the making, with built-in dust collection, router table, flip-top drill press, and storage for days. Welcome back, guys. This will be a long one, so let's jump right into it. I started the process by breaking down all the side pieces I would need for the cabinets of the miter saw station. So the perimeter of my garage has a retaining wall, so the side panels needed to be notched out so it would sit as far against the wall as possible, as well as making a cutout for the toe kick. Now, there are plans available for this miter saw station, and I did modify it, so the relief is removed just because that was specific to my garage. With all 7 of my panels cut out for the cabinets, I started ripping the strips that I would need for all the cross supports for the cabinets. So like I said, there are plans available for this miter saw station. You can follow the link below to my website and go check those out for yourself. I also link the Rockler products and tools that I use throughout this build. Pro tip, cut everything out in batches, that way you're not running back and forth between tools. Right here I set up all my stops for one size of cabinet and cut everything out, and then I was able to add all my pocket holes to all my pieces in one shot. Instead of having to rip down a tool, set up a tool, I was just ready to go, batched everything out, and moved on to the next step. And that next step was to start assembling the carcasses of all the cabinets. So all of the cabinets basically share a wall between them. Instead of having individual carcasses, I built this so it all combined into one. Hopefully that made sense. Ultimately, that just cut down massively on material. Dipping into Jay Bates's playbook, I made leveling feet out of carriage bolts and T-nuts. This worked amazingly well, and it was such an inexpensive way to make leveling feet. The leveling feet were just screwed into place on the bottom side of the cabinets, and then I just took my time leveling the sections before attaching them to the wall. I always find when using pocket holes, clamps are your friends. The joints do tend to come loose, so wherever you can use a clamp, I would suggest doing that. With the left bank of cabinets in place and leveled, I started attaching the midsection where the miter saw would sit. A keen eye would actually notice that I've installed that back rail too high, so I did take that off before installing the tabletop for the miter saw and loosely putting it in place. Now, the miter saw station was about as far away from my dust collector as it could have been in my shop, and a run to get that far just doesn't make a lot of sense. So I did install a dedicated dust collector for the miter saw, which has a run to the router table as well. Next on the to-do list was to start cutting out the tabletops for the left bank of cabinets as well as the right. I needed to get this in place so I could start making holes for the dust collection, as well as making room for the router table and the flip top for the drill press. So if this is your first time visiting my channel, I really want to say thanks for coming and hanging out. I'm pretty new to this YouTube thing, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. If you haven't already, it'd be awesome if you could hit that subscribe button and hit that like button. That lets YouTube know that this is a video worth sharing and that there's people that are liking the same kind of videos that you do that would find interest in this build. Thanks, guys. With the dust collection roughed in, I added some mesh over top of the holes so I wouldn't get big chunks and scraps being sucked up by the dust collector. So I added shelves for each of the sustainers for storage, and I put all those shelves on drawer slides just to make it easier to access the sustainers. And to make sure I put the stop on the back of the shelf correctly, I used the sustainer to measure out where it needed to go. On the sides of the shelves, I just used an 1/8 inch shim to make sure that my drawer slides were at an even height. I honestly didn't know if I was going to like this jig or not for installing drawer sides, but I really did. It made things super simple, and so much so that even an 8-year-old could do it. Keep child labor alive. My particular configuration holds 7 sustainers, but you could always adjust that to add more drawers or take away drawers to add more room for sustainers. It was a bit of an afterthought, but I added an additional sub-assembly to where the router table would go for additional support. I figured if I was going to be routing out where the router would sit into the table, I should have as much support there as possible. There's a lot of great videos out there on how to install this Rockler Pro router lift. I won't bore you with how I did the install because I actually watched a few of them. The one in particular that helped me the most was the one by Chris from Third Coast. So I'll link that video above so you can check that out. Instead, I want to take the time just to say a huge thanks to Rockler for supporting my channel and helping this miter saw come together. I kid you not, if you take a deep dive onto my Instagram page, you'll probably see 4 or 5 different variations of this that I've posted over the years. But it was because of the support of Rockler that I was finally able to make this happen. Again, I've posted below all the Rockler products that I used in this build. If you use the links below, that actually really helps me out. And the best way to support creators is by supporting the brands that are supporting them. With the router lift installed, I started adding the dust collection. There was a 4-inch dust collection hose that went to the base of the router lift, and then a 2-inch that attached into the fence. I used the T-track bit in my router, so I'd be able to attach the router table fence to the work surface. I for sure jumped around a little bit on this build. After completing the router section, I started working on all the drawers for the lower cabinets. And at this point, I could actually start using the miter saw station kind of as is. My preferred method for making drawers is to add a 1/4 inch dado along the bottom side of the drawer. That way I can slide the drawer bottom into the drawer and then tack it into place. I think this is a tip I picked up from Jimmy DiResta, but if your material is just longer than the reach of your miter saw, if you just lift slightly, you'll be able to cut that last little increment of material off the end. I don't suggest doing this with thick material, but it works great with thin stock like this. With the drawers installed, I moved on to cutting out the tabletop so I could add the flip top for the drill press. A flip top workstation is probably one of the smartest pieces of shop furniture a woodworker can build. Brad Rodriguez from Fix This Build That has an amazing design for his flip top table, which allows for 2 tools. I've put a link below, so if you want to go check out his plans for just the flip top cart, you should go do that. I milled up some ash for the center of my flip-top drill press. The idea here is to give as much strength to the middle section of the flip-top as possible. This is what the drill press would be attached to, and as well, everything would be laminated against. So I use the cross supports that you can see on the left here to actually drill and line up the holes appropriately for attaching the flip top. With everything lined up, I also drilled a hole through the side of the cabinet and then into the flip top so I can add this pin, which I found at a tractor supply store. These work really great to slide in and out and makes things super easy when you're trying to move a tool quickly. And then I mounted the drill press to the flip top table with 4 GRK screws and washers. This thing isn't going anywhere. I came back the next day and added this small latch to the front just because it was sagging slightly from the weight of the drill press. I've said this a few times to people in conversation, but I think that if I was to start my tool collection again from scratch, I probably would start with a track saw instead of a table saw. The track saw, especially for breaking down sheet goods, is just such an easy way to safely break down large pieces of material. Alright, home stretch. I started building the outer casing for the upper cabinet and then attached the inner sides once that was in place. I did add some extra electrical to where the miter saw station is in my garage. I didn't film any of that just because that's not what this video is about, but one of the outlets I need to cut out a small section in the shelf so I'd be able to plug in my drills in the charging station. With my upper cabinet carcasses installed, I could start adding the hardware I would require for the cabinet doors. Okay guys, real talk. This is only my third time installing inset European style hinges, and this went off perfectly. Helped that I made sure my cabinet was as square as possible, but the jigget system from Rockler made it super easy to get everything lined up correctly, and I only had to make minimal adjustments to the doors once they were installed. So to add some additional strength to the shelves along the middle section, I did reinforce them along the backside with these lips, which were basically just 1-inch material cut down and then stood up vertically on the backside of the shelf. I added a small chamfer on the controversial miter saw fence and glued that into place. I measured it out in such a way so the T-track that I installed above the fence would line up perfectly with the T-track that was already installed on the router fence. And I used a self-centering drill bit, or a VIX or a VEX bit, to pre-drill my holes for my screws. I'm still trying to decide what I want to finish the miter saw station with. I'm thinking a water-based polyurethane, but if you have any suggestions, I'd love to hear about that in the comments below. If you made it this far, I really want to say thanks for checking out this video. This build was a lot of fun, and it feels so good to finally have this in place. I just want to give another shout out to Rockler and just say thanks again for helping me make this miter saw station a reality. We'll see you guys next time.